G'day there guys, it's your Aussie hubby Markee, back at it again with another episode of r/Revenge. Now if you're feeling like some revenge today in your life, I want you to chuck a like on this video just cause you can. Maybe an Aussie flag down in the comments, no pressure. And with that said, I want you to sit back, relax, chuck a prawn on the barbie, and have a bloody good day. Enjoy the content. Just want to start off this episode by saying happy birthday to Lady K. She is one of my patrons and she asked for a shout out, so I hope it's a good day today. And thank you for requesting an r/ProRevenge episode. Posted by user Nadaste, titled, Silence Me for Years? Enjoy Losing All of Your Friends. So, some backstory. My freshman year of high school, I was sexually assaulted by a peer, and so was another girl. I kept it to myself because we had a lot of mutual friends, and I didn't want them to be uncomfortable, or feel like they had to choose a side. I also felt like I was responsible, and it made me feel really guilty. I also suffered a lot of psychological repercussions, an eating disorder, and I began cutting. I developed severe anxiety and depression. Finally, it peaked, and I forced myself to tell my English teacher. The police were called, I was interviewed. Already, I could tell the detective was not taking me seriously. He also blatantly misquoted in the statement and used words like misunderstanding and he went in for a kiss. Even though I made it very clear I struggled and tried to push him away, and he had me pinned to the wall with his hand around my throat. He confessed after 10 minutes of being interviewed by the police. The charges got dropped by the prosecutor because he felt that the case would never go to trial. He was a star student and was very well respected. After this, he was banned from speaking at school-sanctioned events. I was still quiet because I'm not a rock-the-boat type person. Eventually, I found out he was planning on going to the same college I was going to. I wrote him a letter asking him to please reconsider. He said he was very sorry earlier. I told him in the letter to put his money where his mouth is and prove it. He never replied. A few weeks later, I found out he's planning to speak at a baccalaureate event put on by a local interfaith community. I emailed the teacher in charge and told her what happened and politely asked her not to allow him to speak. She emailed back and essentially said that that's terrible, I'm so sorry, we're still going to let him speak though, feel better. I'm livid at this point. I've been dismissed, belittled, ignored and unheard for years despite my efforts to get justice. He's still incredibly popular and everyone loves him. I decide I've done all I can. I tried to take care of things on the down low, talk to him privately to come to an agreement, talk to the organizer to try to come to an agreement, and they both ignored me just like the police did. So I decide I'm not going to be quiet anymore. I attend the baccalaureate event, and while he's giving his speech, ironically about treating others with respect, lol, I hold up a sign that says, Redacted, has assaulted 2 women. Is this the face of class of 2020? Stop giving assaulters and abusers a platform to speak. Stop silencing women. By the time the event is over, everyone is talking about it, and everyone has taken at both him and the organizers for letting him speak. Many of the girls there are victims of sexual assault themselves, and they are all furious that the organization knowingly let a predator speak. I feel incredible. It's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. The last thing he told me after he'd finished violating me was, don't tell anyone. And even after years had passed, and I felt comfortable speaking about it to a select few, and the police knew, and all the teachers knew, he was still praised. And every time I heard someone talk about him fondly, I heard that little voice from deep inside me saying, you're letting him win. Now that everyone knows, and everyone hates him, I know that finally, I can lay this matter to bed. I can finally let go. So there's a few edits here. This first one is talking about the gold, and that they just like to make a blanket statement to all sexual assault victims in my DMs, and on the comments of this post. You are enough, you are loved. And even though the system is rigged against us, I hear you. I am listening. You don't need to hold up a sign to get your revenge. Sometimes taking care of yourself and moving on is enough. Trust me, I know it's easier said than done, but just know that I'm on your side. I'm in your corner. I see you. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you ever need to talk. I love you. Edit 3. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for all of your well wishes. I love all of you so much. You are so sweet. I would like to address a few things. I have gotten a lot of direct messages as well as comments on this post from survivors of sexual assault telling me how brave I am and how I'm their hero. I appreciate that so much. You have no idea how happy that makes my heart, but I have something to say to all of you who said that. Yes, it was scary and hard to hold the sign up. I'm not saying that it wasn't a brave thing to do, it was, and I'm proud of myself. However, I don't like what that implies. I don't like the implication that a survivor who is not yet ready to share their story, choosing to keep it private, is in any way an act of cowardice. My friends, you're all brave. You are brave just for waking up in the morning. You're brave for going to work. You are brave for making yourself dinner and letting yourself enjoy it. You have nothing to be ashamed of. That I can assure you. You are perfectly enough, and you have nothing to prove. You do not have to earn your place in this world with acts of courage. You do not have to prove to the masses that you deserve to be alive, that you deserve to be happy. Just know that for yourself, because it's true. How could it possibly be anything but true? How could you possibly be anything less than perfect? You are kind, you are compassionate, you are strong, you are resilient, you are intelligent, you are brave. Be your own hero, my friends. I love you all. I hope those kind words help some people, even though it's not particularly r/ProRevenge, it still needs to be said. Posted by user Take Me to the Dumpster, titled, Restaurant Scams Me for Fake Google Reviews. I burn their Google Reviews page and reputation to the ground and get the media to cover it. Hi folks, first post here, thought it would definitely fit. So about a month ago, I applied for a sushi restaurant called Yoshi's. I got a text from their hiring manager, and we chatted about my availability, location, start date, yada yada. She then asked me to write a review of general Japanese food to show I knew what I was talking about, and could upsell customers. Fine, I write a long review and sent it to her. She then sends me a tiny link URL and tells me to post it there before I would be invited for an interview. I click it, and what do you know? It's the Google page for a whole different restaurant all the way across the country. So I read the reviews, and they had done this to 30 or so people in the last 2 weeks, at the different locations franchised to the same crazy owner. I was ticked, to say the least. This happened peak COVID in my state. People are unemployed at staggering rates, struggling to feed their families, and these a-holes are scamming potential hires for fake reviews. Being unemployed, I had some time on my hands, so I screenshotted our convo and posted it all over social media. They went from 3.4 to 1.2 in a few hours, with more than 70 new reviews about their crappy behavior. I was satisfied with that, and a report to the Attorney General here. But then I noticed, the owner had managed to get all of the reviews removed. So at that point, I went full nuclear. I contacted every media outlet, reported them to every oversight board, emailed corporate about it, and reported them to Google. I managed to get one of our local news outlets to cover it, and Google ended up removing all of their reviews altogether. Scam me and countless others during a global pandemic? I ruin your business's reputation for your crappy behavior. Posted by user GTC Infinite, titled, My dad had an affair with his best friend for life's wife. So my dad had an affair with his BFF's wife. Let's call her Jane. She claimed she was pretty much in love with my father, and of course her husband didn't know. I found out because once I got a Facebook message from a fake account telling me that my father was banging his BFF's wife. I actually didn't care. My parents are divorced since 2005. The problem was that someone unknown was sending my mother text messages, telling her to leave my father alone, and many offensive things. We let it slide for a while, but then those anonymous text messages became a daily thing. We confronted my dad, and he confessed that he was sleeping with Jane, but he said she was not the one sending the messages. He said he was sure because Jane's husband was also getting those messages. My dad was practically blinded by her manipulations, and my mum and I had a really strong hunch that it was her. My dad got so mad after we suggested it that he stopped speaking to me and my mum for a while. I also got mad, but much more offended, because he would still not believe me. I mean, I had no reason to lie to him. Still, I let all that slide. But then, I got another anonymous message offending me, telling me I was just like my mother, and that's why my boyfriend had dumped me, and that we would be alone for the rest of our lives, and things like that. Then, I got really mad. I went to the cyber police, which is a thing where I'm from, okay? And they tracked the source of the anonymous message. It turns out that it was her, and she was also sending her husband messages because she was so desperate for the truth to come out so she could be with my father. Although I think that just confronting her husband would have been better. What she really wanted was to distance my father from me and my mum. She was messing with my family, so I decided to mess with hers, and sent the proof to her husband and her sons that she was behind the anonymous messages, and that she was, in fact, sleeping with my dad. I also showed my dad the proof and exposed her on Facebook. She was a saleswoman, so it did affect her. Her sons and her husband were so mad at her, she had to move out of her house, and my dad broke up with her as well. She was left alone, but I feel like that's what she deserved. Posted by user Arizona Avenue, titled Revenge on Evil Landlord. When I was in university, I'd hear stories about horrible landlords of students' housing, but hadn't experienced it myself. Until third year, when it felt like we got 3 years' worth of crappy landlords all in one go. It began when I heard noises in the wall behind my bed at night. I brushed it off for a while until I realized that it was an animal in the wall. I told the landlords the next day, and they immediately played dumb, acting as if I was stupid in front of my housemates for suggesting that something could fit inside of a wall. That was the first alarm bell. Why immediately try to embarrass me into dropping it? After explaining that I know what a cavity wall is, she asked if we'd seen anything in the kitchen. Oddly specific, we didn't think about it until later. From then on, her husband dealt with us. We weren't aware that he was our landlord too. A little time passes, still nothing done about the noise in my wall. Not that it was a surprise. I'd worked out by then that it was probably something like a mouse, and that it could run through the terrace of houses as long as it didn't chew its way through my wall or die in there. I put the whole thing on the back burner. Until we were all sat in the living room and we heard a thud in the kitchen, then squeaking. There was a giant rat in our kitchen. The rat disappeared into a hole in the completely crumbling kitchen wall, and the landlord claimed that we made it up and that they'd never had a rodent problem. I contacted the previous tenants through Facebooking names that I found on letters for them that had been posted to us by mistake. The property had had a rat problem for the last 3 years before we moved in at least. I set up a rat trap and caught one, took photos and sent them to the landlord to tell him to sort the problem out. He told us that because there was a line in our contract about the landlord not paying for pest control, the contract specified wasp nests, etc. We didn't even think about rats when we signed it, you know? That we'd have to pay the hundreds of pounds to fix it. He had knowingly written that into our contract so he wouldn't have to pay out, instead of fixing the kitchen wall and the exterior wall where the rats were getting in. To cut the rest of the setting the scene part of the story short, we called the council who sent a pest control team. While on their visit, one of the men took my housemate to one side and told her that our landlord is evil and he is known for getting nasty. They told him that it wasn't our fault that there were rats, it was his, and he screamed into my face until he was bright red about how I was a terrible person and was trying to take him down for no reason. One of my housemates had to leave because she was scared. I wasn't. We were in a room full of men who were backing us up, making himself look worse for screaming in my face like that. I'm female and was 22 at the time, about half his size. He tried to sue us for slander. It isn't slander if it's true. So, swing and a miss, buddy. Now for the revenge. It was written into our contract that we had to be notified 24 hours in advance if anyone needed access to the house, which included house viewings. I began my mission: stop any other student from getting stuck in this hellhole. The house was being shown by agents, so it made it fairly easy. I left the rat traps in prominent places, casually explaining why we needed them if asked, and if I felt I was being too subtle, making a show of, "Oh gosh, please ignore the rat traps. The landlord said he'd fix the kitchen wall where they get in, but hasn't gotten around to it, so we have to catch them." I was honest about the mold problem in the bathroom. When I found out they were planning on increasing rent by £100 a month, I made a point of saying something like, "Well, it's just about worth the rent I'm paying." I made sure to say his name so they wouldn't get away with using his wife's name as a front while his reputation for aggression stayed hidden. The agents never said anything directly to me, and because we had to be notified, I could always make sure I was home when there was a viewing. My housemates fully supported my revenge, but I was the woman of action in the house. When I'm sure I'm in the right, I will do what's necessary to make things right. That was until they tried to turn up unannounced one day. Not even knocking, just unlocked our front door and walked in. Luckily, I was in the house and kicked them out for not informing us, and told them that they were in breach of our contract. If the crappy landlord could use it to beat us with, two can play at that game. No new tenants had signed for the house by the time we were free of that hellhole. It's been 2 years now though, so I have no idea what happened to the rat house. Posted by user Reggie1, titled, "Got my freshman dorm leader fired a year after he called the cops on me." I've never really posted anything before, but I have a funny revenge and karma story that my friends have always enjoyed. I first got to college my freshman year and met the dorm leader, the RA at most schools. Like most colleges, the dorm leader was the upperclassman that lived in the dorms and monitored the freshman halls. My dorm's leader's name was Julio, fake name by the way, and at first he seemed like a nice dude that minded his own business. We talked about how he would stay out of everyone's business if we would stay out of his. Also, he tried to be the cool dorm leader, and always mentioned to me about how he drank tons of alcohol in his freshman years in the dorms. He gave off the impression that he didn't really care if we ever drank in our dorm rooms, but to just keep it on the low if we did. I really didn't drink much at all, but I appreciated the fact that he seemed pretty normal and didn't try to rat on kids. During the last week of October of my freshman year of college, I had one of the hardest weeks of my academic career. I was a biochemistry major, taking some pretty tough classes, and had 3 exams that week. At the end of the week, a friend I had recently made down the hall invited me to his dorm room to watch an upcoming NBA game. As we were watching the game, he had a bottle of vodka and gave some to the guys in the dorm. Being a naive and stupid freshman kid just trying to make some friends, I took 1 shot of vodka and continued to watch the game. As we're watching the game, one of the guys in the dorm spills a bottle of soda and rushes to the bathroom to grab some paper towels. As he walks out of the dorm room, Julio walked by and noticed the bottle of vodka. He laughed and said something of the sorts of, "I remember when I was a freshman, haha, just try and keep it down." We thanked him and told him to have a good night. It seemed like a normal conversation and nothing out of the ordinary. 30 minutes later, we hear a knock on the door and 2 policemen show up with breathalyzers. They told us they had received a complaint from Julio about underage drinking and a party being thrown in the dorm room. Remember, it was 3 guys watching a Lakers game on a Thursday night at 8 p.m. I ended up getting a minor in consumption charge for blowing a .02 to do 20 hours community service, a reflection journal, and appear to the Judicial Affairs Center at my college about my supposed drinking problem. I'm not blaming the officer for giving me a ticket, but I was pretty upset that Julio, who always talked about getting crap-faced freshman year in the dorm, called the police right after he essentially gave us the okay for the night. A few days later, I see Julio and straight up asked him why he decided to rat me out. Specifically, I asked why he didn't just tell me to head back to my dorm if he had a problem with the alcohol instead of calling the police right after our conversation. He responds word for word with, "You made a decision and have to suffer the consequences of that decision." After that incident, I never really talked to him, but he always tried to be buddy-buddy when he saw me in the hallway. Anyway, I eventually leave the dorms and move off campus for my sophomore year. I had decided to rush a fraternity my freshman year and ended up meeting some really nice guys. I've never been the fraternity type, but I went to a smaller college where fraternities are a lot different than most places. During the second semester of my sophomore year, my fraternity was taking a new pledge class. One day, I received a text from Julio saying, "One of the guys pledging your fraternity has been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. I thought I would let you know." Turns out, Julio was the dorm leader for a freshman pledging my fraternity and ratted him out to Judicial Affairs as well. Thinking the term dealing alcohol was the lamest and funniest thing I've ever heard, I sent that to our fraternity GroupMe and everyone laughed about it. About a week later, that kid pledging our fraternity came up to me asking about the message I received from Julio. Essentially, a pretty similar thing happened to him like what happened to me. Julio found out he had given another kid in the dorm a bottle of wine and reported it to the police. This kid ended up getting a minor in possession and had to speak with Judicial Affairs. This is where the story gets hilarious. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the kid pledging our fraternity told the Judicial Affairs guy that his dorm leader, Julio was now a senior at this point, had texted me about the charges pending against him. Apparently, it's a huge violation to discuss pending charges against a freshman in your dorm to a third party. The Judicial Affairs guy told him that if he could prove Julio was discussing this charge with a third party, aka me, he would receive severe sanctions. Basically, if I sent that text to the Judicial Affairs people, Julio would be in a crap load of trouble. So, I sent the text that night to the Judicial Affairs people. After that, I didn't hear anything about what happened to Julio, and had honestly forgotten about it. However, nearing the end of the school year in my sophomore year, I saw Julio at the dining hall, and came up to speak to me. He tells me a story about how he knows I was the one who ratted him to Judicial Affairs, how he ended up getting fired from his dorm leader position, lost the scholarship money his dorm leader job provided him, and overall how crappy his life has been since he got fired. After going through this entire sob story, he asked me, "Why did you do that? This could have been handled completely differently. I didn't have to get fired, and I could have kept my scholarship money." I look at him dead in the eye for what seemed like 30 seconds and say, "Julio, you made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision." I can imagine what kind of guy Julio is. He's not really popular, so he's trying hard to look cool using his seniority and position. His stories about him drinking as a freshman was one of his ways to make him look cool. It could have been a true story, but it's just probably him drinking alone and no one knows. The fact that he ratted people for drinking and used the term dealing alcohol really shows that he's not a popular guy. Probably just a loser who wants to look cool in front of his underclassmen. Oh, everyone thought Julio sucked. He would make these outrageous stories and try to pass them off as true. One time, he made up this wild story about how he was engaged in his senior year of high school and his fiancée cheated on him and got pregnant from another guy. Turns out he was openly gay in high school and went back in the closet when he went to college. Also, he always told this story about how he was once offered a full ride to Princeton but turned it down. The other dorm leader in the hall was actually a pretty cool dude, and basically let everyone know that Julio was a pathological liar. Posted by user MikeRoo7, titled, "Half the class fails the midterm after cheater copies me." I don't have a problem helping classmates. I really don't. I even tutored several classmates during my final semester of undergrad because they needed the help. They all ended up passing their classes with my assistance. This story comes from a particularly tough business information systems class during my undergraduate education. The students in this class were mostly non-technical business majors, so this new material wasn't at all similar to anything we'd learned in other classes. Needless to say, most of the students were struggling, including me. I still had a 4.0 in college at this point, though I finished with a 3.99, and I was willing to put in max effort to keep my stellar GPA. I started studying hard. I made my own Quizlet sets, I read the book every night, I finished assignments a week early, and I did outside research. After grinding it out in this class for about a month, I was working on assignments in a room designated for quiet homework time, and that's where our story begins. Several other students from my class were there and working on the same assignment I was on. Judging by the size of exasperation, the irritated whispers and requests for help, they weren't having much success. Having studied relentlessly for a month, I was having an easier time of it. As I got up to go get some water from the fountain in the hall, a classmate asked for my help. I told him I could do that and I'd be right back. I returned a few minutes later to find what I can only describe as a bunch of busy bees happily working away. This was strange since they were hopelessly stuck 2 minutes before that, but whatever. My classmate tells me he figured it out without me. Now, I'm not an idiot, so I know the 5 people in this room probably copied my work off my computer when I went to get water. Scumbag move number 1. But as it turns out, no one in the class needed help the next day or the day after. Whoever in the study room had stolen my work had forwarded it to most of the class. Scumbag move number 2. I don't mind being helpful, but I hate being used. So I made a plan to get back at the people who had stolen my work. It didn't take long to organize my plan to carry it out. Here is how it went. 1. I changed an answer on the next assignment by multiplying by -1. $1,500 became -$1,500 on this question. 2. The next week, I left my computer in the same place as before and went to get water just like I had done the week before. 75% of the people in my class of 40 people put -$1,500 as the answer to question 3, which was definitely incorrect. 3. I began studying relentlessly for the midterm. Our professor had said that he wouldn't adjust the weight of the test, something like your score divided by 50 on a test with 60 points available, so the score of 40 becomes 80% instead of 67%. If anyone scored particularly well, that is. This class was difficult, and no one was expecting anyone to score over 75%. So all of my classmates figured the weight of the test would be adjusted. My plan was to wreck the curve, even though it's not a curve, and deny everyone the adjusted weight by producing a sufficiently high score. 4. I recruited a classmate who hadn't stolen my work to study with. Together, we aimed to score high enough that our professor couldn't adjust the weight of the midterm. Here is how it all played out. No one who copied me realized the answer was incorrect. Every last one of those idiots submitted the wrong answer to question 3. This next part surprised me, but my classmates began insisting the class was unfair, too difficult, or rigged, and launched these complaints at our professor. One day, after class, I had the following exchange since I was the last student out of the classroom. Professor says, "Obi, do you think this class is too hard?" Honestly, this class is hard, but if people spent as much time studying as they did complaining, they would be fine. They really just need to get to work. I thought the same. Me, deciding spur of the moment my next move. I also happened to know that most of the class incorrectly copied my work on the last assignment. Question 3 should be a net income of $1,500, not a net loss of $1,500. I put down the wrong answer initially, everyone copied me, and then I changed the answer late. I think you can reasonably conclude that anyone with -$1,500 as the answer cheated off my incorrect work. I figured they all copied, but I didn't know you were the source. Anyway, thanks for your candor and your dedication to the class. I didn't cheat, so I don't know what happened to those who did. But depending on the class, they would get either a 0 for their assignment or a plagiarism citation. So they got one of those. Fast forward to test day, and I'm ready to go. I know since most of the students are business majors, they need 70% to pass the class because it's a required course. Hurting them on the midterm will go a long way in helping drop their grades. I take the test, I'm the first one done, and I leave pretty sure that I've done enough to deny the class exam weight adjustment. A week later, we get our exams back. Tests are distributed all around me with scores on the top in red ink. 68, 71, 70, 66, 75, 67. And these are the smart students. Someone on the end of my row takes a test from our professor and lets out a sigh as he begins passing a test down my row. It stops on my desk. 93%. I've won. Some idiot in the front of the class says, "So is there going to be a curve?" Nope. What was the high score? 93%. Average score for the exam was 71, so a good number of people didn't get a passing score. Maybe they made up for it on the final and passed, but I don't care. I got mine. TLDR, people steal my homework, so I bait them into giving a wrong answer, tip the professor off on their cheating, and score high enough on the midterm to deny anyone a chance for an adjusted score. G'day there guys, Outro Markee here. Just wanted to say thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Now with that said, we have some special mentions. Everyone that signed up for my Patreon, everyone that's a channel member, you guys all know who you are. I'm going to start putting you on screen in the near future. Sorry, I'm very lazy, but I do love each and every one of you, and you all know that. If you want to join, there is links down in the description below. If you want to be a channel member, there's a join button next to subscribe. It helps me out immensely. Also, I have a second channel that does memes. It's called Markee too. It should be on screen here now. If you like memes and you want to laugh with me, it's some not so politically correct content all the time. Hope you enjoy it. Click on the screen, subscribe, and enjoy the memes. That's all I have for today, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.